And that narrative of the quote unquote welfare queen, the one that's really like, milking the
Mhm.
system and is corrupt and kind of behind the scenes and laughing about it and will never work again. That is such a tiny percentage of the good, hardworking folks that really just want to be able to feed their families and live a life where they provide for themselves. They don't want to live off the government,
Mm,
but that is actually what you need. But part of it is also that a lot of these programs are broken.
mm,
And that's the part that for me can become overwhelming because the policy piece is tied up in so many larger systems that are like really committed to reproducing themselves. So power really holds on to itself. Like it is not going to give it away without a fight. And that's actually where, again, the power of the people from below comes in for me because this is like a cross racial, cross class issue. Aside from like that 0.1%, that's at the very top, kind of controlling everything, including the narrative. The rest of us are in the same boat. Like we are going to go down in this ship together, even though it seems like we're completely on different teams.
mm,
And I think realizing that that narrative is intentionally pitting us against one another to distract us from the fact that none of us are getting what we need. You know, maybe we feel like we're paying too many taxes as it is. Well, most of those taxes aren't even going to the places they need to be going,
mm,
right?
mm,
And we have, all this time we've always kind of used Sweden as like the model of what we definitely don't want to become. I have cousins in Sweden, and I actually have one who's much more of a capitalist. He's sort of like, like I wish I was in America. But, frankly, the fact that they have had free education, they're not, swimming in student debts. They have had roofs over their heads, been able to feed their families, they lived beautiful lives, had long, luxurious summers living with one another, enjoying family, being out with friends, feeling the sun on their skin. I'm like, I say this as I feel like I'm more pale than I've ever been, right? Just spending my whole summer inside an office writing. I just think when you really think about the value of a good life and what it is to live for one another, to live for the people you love instead of living for the job, living for some created political ideal that doesn't even serve you. Like I think that's what can actually motivate some action.
mm.
But it's so hard to get there because it has been framed as if the only way to get out of it is to vote for one party versus the other. I think that's such a false binary. I'm like, frankly, the two-party system doesn't serve us. I think we all know it. Our choices are terrible. But I do think once you think about voting at the local level and creating sort of the local communities that do serve you, filling your school boards with people that, reflect your values, making sure that your city councils are filled with good folk that aren't, sort of making corrupt deals behind closed doors. There's a lot of power in that. And then just community organizing.
Mm.
People think about that as if it's some radical thing, but really it's all about literally organizing your people, bringing them together, and then creating a kind of collective base. So you have people to fall back on and you aren't living these isolated lives.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's there's kind of like a chicken or the egg aspect to it, which I think you hit, and maybe you call out, the chicken or the egg coming first, because like the political media, political, whatever you want to call it, like the social constructs, the framing that it's given to us that we should believe this certain way. Maybe like you gave the example that Sweden is something we don't want to become. Like, is it that we actually believe that and then politicians just seized on that and use that to kind of manipulate or to get what they wanted? Or is it that it didn't actually exist and they just fed it to us and now we believe it? Because even as you're explaining that, like the long summers and the spending time with people, it goes back to what we were saying before about poverty. Like there's this weird sensation, at least I can relate to growing up where I did and people that are around me, where like as you say those words, there's this like dual sensation of like that sounds amazing, but at the same time, that's horrifying because that's not what it is. Like we're not supposed to be living these enjoyable lives with these great summers and spending time with our families. And particularly in America, there's a lot of people, and I'll give the benefit of the doubt here. Maybe they're well intentioned and there's rationale to it, but they feel like yeah, that's all nice, but you don't get stuff done that way. Like, look at all the American exceptionalism. Look at all the things we've accomplished. Look at all the amazing things. And sure, it comes at a cost, right? It's a different lifestyle, and we're not Sweden. But frankly, and this is me speaking, a little bit, tongue in cheek, but like we're better than them. Like we do things, we create things, we develop things that are better. And there's almost like this bold, like braggadocious idea of like we're okay being a little bit miserable. This is the way it's supposed to be, and we're better off that way. And that's where I struggle. Like again, chicken or the egg, is that something that people actually believe? And there's just it's a value system, and some people value, they think quality of life is that, like accomplishing things, getting things done, innovating, all that stuff. And some other people don't. Or is it somewhat as you were saying, like all of us probably mostly would rather live better, higher quality lives, but we've been given this narrative that says this is the better way to be. And if you're a true American, then you'll value that hard work and you won't want to be like Sweden. Like, can you tell chicken or the egg there? Like, is there truth to it? Is there just some people that see the world differently and it's okay that they see the world differently? Or is there something wrong with that view?
No, that's totally, it's the latter, right? There is the history that lays out exactly how that narrative has been fed to us. Because if you go back, for example, to the New Deal, like the New Deal was the most socialist kind of state that we've ever been in. And it's also when people were thriving, they were actually
Mm,
living good lives. And I should be very clear, I mean, some people,
sure.
right? Black people, for example, were locked out of that. And that's been part of the story of what, the historian Ira Katznelson calls white affirmative action,
Mm,
kind of system of giving benefits to white Americans over time that wasn't considered a handout. It was considered what they were due for their
mhm,
hard work. And it allowed them to build wealth, buy houses, get education. And then, of course, in the post civil rights era, when it was beginning to open up to everybody, they were kind of, it was pulled out from underneath. And so it was much easier to say, like, well, I worked really hard for what I got and I passed down my house, and it's not my fault that I have what I have. Well, no, it's not your fault, but it was given to you, right? So anyway, that's kind of been part of the narrative. But it made it really easy then to say, like, oh, we definitely don't want to be Sweden.
mm,
And to kind of feed into, again, that myth of meritocracy that, you know what, if you do work hard enough, you'll be able to make it. And we have so many success stories that we can point to, tons of, non-white immigrant families, for example. Like even look at Vivek Ramaswamy or Nikki Haley. Like this is part of their shtick, is to talk about being model minorities, being sort of examples of the American dream. It's ahistoric, which is the part that I struggle with. I truly want to give everyone a benefit of the doubt, but when I've done the kind of work to see what's going on behind the scenes, and there are, even like statements, you have the documents that show the kind of political conversations and posturing behind closed doors, you realize it really is a strategy. It's meant to appeal to moderates because it is a feel-good story. That's something I talk about a lot in the book, because I talk about, the co-optation of civil rights memory and how it's become a revisionist history of Dr. King and what civil rights movement did. And I say, like, I understand the impetus to have this rosy memory of the past. I get it because it feels good. You
mm,
want to be proud of the place where you live. You want to focus on the good stuff and forget the bad stuff. And also, a lot of times you kind of want to move on. You
mm.
don't want to kind of harp on all the bad things that happened before. You want to understand them as a product of their time. But the part that's dangerous, the part that ends up being really consequential, is that it makes it impossible to understand why inequality persists and why it's run so deep.